least amount of exercise required. The logical place to start, even if you're skeptical, is with the least amount possible. The logical place to start is not with an arbitrary number like 20, but with the least amount possible. In other words, if one set doesn't work, you can't go any lower to find the least amount necessary. You can't do 0 sets and have a workout. If one set doesn't work, you could always go to 2. But I can save you the time and the headache. I've already worked it out. I've trained over 400 people, closer to 500 people now over the last 4.5 years. One set per exercise and never more than 2 sets per muscle is all that's needed. That's just the way it is. And if you're incredulous, you're skeptical, the reason for that is that you still have operative in your subconscious the childlike logic that more is better. And if more is really better, as they imply, then why not do 200 sets? Why stop at 20? Where did they ever get the number 20 anyway? It's literally arbitrary. Remember, science is an exacting discipline. There's no room for the arbitrary in science.
All right. Welcome back, Heavy Duty Crew. As you can see, that is sunlight shining on me, so we are not live on a Friday as usual. But I've got a very special guest today that we made the time for. I got Mr. Paul Carter on the right of me here.
Technically not on the right of you in real life, just on the screen.
Yeah, on the screen. Yeah. So Paul was a topic of conversation when we first started the show about 2 years ago, and when we did our Bromley series. And I first heard of Paul Carter listening to Alexander Bromley seethe just terribly, wishing that he would just come back to reason. Paul, come back. Why have you left us, Paul?
So I haven't listened to that. I don't know. I know Alex tried to falsely claim that I built my foundation and based off like high volume training, and I thought that was hilarious. That's actually there's been a couple of guys. That one guy, Rufus, the big mustache dude, he tried the same thing, and I was like, well, there's a whole decade of my training log public. Like it's the dumbest thing you could ever accuse me of, because there's 10 years of my training logs that are on my blog. So I think a lot of that got misconstrued, because the way sometimes I would write articles is that I would write like, say, 4 sets of 6 to 8 or whatever. Because at the time you would just kind of include the warm-up sets into the, you're doing squats. So you're doing like 4 sets of 6 to 8 or whatever. And you just kind of expect that everybody's going to know to kind of like pyramid up to your top working set. And then sometimes I would go ahead and include, I would include the language of, 4 or 5 sets of 6 to 8 working up to a top set. If I was doing really heavy work, because I was powerlifting through a lot of those years too, it might be 7 or 8 sets, but that was, again, including, if I was squatting 135, see how things went, 225, 315, 405, 455, 500, 545, 585. And I lifted all those weights because I know them exactly. So I would be like, 7 or 8 sets, but it's always, in the context of that was not, you're not training for hypertrophy. You're training to get really good at those motions, those movements. So I built my foundation off of, when I got involved in lifting, it was Dorian Yates and Mike Minster stuff. And I've got like a ton of podcasts and articles and everything where I talk about that openly. So I'm like, man, this is like the last thing you guys want to come at me about, because I can just do 1,000 screenshots to disprove that altogether. So I think that was the thing. I did do, like any guy that went through the years, I did stuff then that I espouse against now, and kind of talked about that before we started the podcast. I'm like, over the years, you should learn better. You should continually try to develop your knowledge and how this works in a more effective and efficient way. And so over the years, I dropped stuff like drop sets or high rep stuff or whatever. But yeah, of course I did that stuff, because as you're going through the years, that was what all of us, thought, you had to do some of that stuff for a different type of stimulus or novel stimulus. And even the scientific evidence-based approach for a while was that you wanted to include a variety of rep ranges because of stuff like metabolic stress and all that kind of stuff. And now we know that's not true. So I don't hold it against anybody when they say they used to do that stuff and like they know better now. I'm like, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. But it seems like I get held to the standard of, well, you contradicted yourself because you said you used to do like 100 rep barbell curls. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't do that now because I know better.
Yeah, they
So
do the same thing to me, Paul. I tell them what I've been doing for the last 4 years. What has really made the improvements on my physique, what I do, how often I train, whatever, whatever. Like, oh, you didn't start that way. Well, no, I didn't. But you know what was the common factor back when I started was there was always working up to one set that took 100% of my effort, and I gave everything I had to that mother. That's high intensity training. Everybody who has success building muscle with hypertrophy does high intensity training, no matter what way you want to skin that cat. And
eventually, it's funny. I had this talk yesterday. If the high volume approach truly was the way that worked, then eventually everybody would have figured out you need to be doing 40 or 50 sets a week. And everybody eventually figures out is, oh, well, I started doing less and I started seeing better, like improvement in my performance, and I started seeing more progressive overload and I started growing. And that is the most common answer. I have never met somebody who started doing more volume and saw better improvements. Not a single person, but I've met and talked to tons. Now, these are just anecdotes, but over the years, I've talked to tons who reduced their volume and said, I saw much better results. And that's a commonality. And if you look at if you understand how to interpret the research properly, not that I'm the wizard, but if you look at the research properly, you understand volume has a point of diminishing returns. There's only so many sets that you can do that are going to be truly stimulating for you. So you can't, the idea that you are going to pack on more physiology would have to not exist for you to be able to do tons of volume and keep growing, because fatigue exists and every set that we do comes with some stimulus, but it also comes with some fatigue. And that fatigue reduces motor unit recruitment and fiber force on each successive set. When that happens, what we're doing is that we're not getting stimulus on the largest fibers that have the most growth potential in each successive set. So if you think of the first set you do for muscle group, you get one arbitrary unit of hypertrophy stimulus. Second set's going to give you about 40% more than that. Third set, about 60% more than that. And then each successive set, it starts dropping off. It seems to plateau around 6 sets. So that's with adequate rest periods. So if you're the idea that volume, and I think Bromley's a volume guy, like do a ton of volume or whatever, and all those guys, I'm like, no, it doesn't work. Sorry, it doesn't work. And you'd have to get rid of every piece of physiological data that we have for the last 50 years to make that work.
yeah, and when they can't do that, they'll just tell you that, oh, well, you didn't always train this way. They can't argue with your actual arguments, so they always pivot back to something else. They're always just going to tell you, oh, well, that's not how you got your muscles, Paul. That only works now because what you did back then,
Well,
Paul.
okay, but yeah, that was another one. So like in the last year, I gained roughly 5 to 7 pounds. There was a guy literally made a video that said, I don't believe Paul Carter gained 7 pounds. And I have before and afters. Like it's clear I'm much larger in the last year and a half than I was when I started changing my principles. And then Terrence Ruffin gained 11 pounds in the last year and a half by changing all this stuff over to what I consistently talk about. Here's the really good principles. So people will say, well, Terrence didn't, it's not how he got big. I'm like, but he got to this level and then leveled up by doing that stuff. So how you get from A to B, to like a certain degree of development, there's a million ways to skin a cat. When you get to that point where you can't progress anymore, that's when the real nut cutting starts. So how am I going to get from here where I'm stuck to that next level? And people, when you start saying, well, I reduced volume, I brought my reps down, I stopped training to failure every set, I cut out all intensifiers, I did all these things and I grew. People will be like, well, that's not how you grew the first time. I'm like, right. So I had to figure out how to get past this plateau. And if you want to figure out how to get past this plateau, I can tell you that for the majority of guys out there, if they've been doing high volume intensifiers, training to failure, blah, 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 it's the same stuff constantly, then you're going to have to get rid of that stuff. And it's as we were talking about before, I don't really have whatever that thing is. If somebody tells me there's a better way to do this, I'll be like, well, show me, tell me. And then I'll do that. Because if there's a better way, I want to do the better way. So I don't
And it's
have like
counterintuitive.
I don't have
It's
an emotional
counterintuitive
intent.
to take those things out.
Say what?
It's counterintuitive to take those things out, for a lot of people. And so I think, like you're saying as well, I'm sorry to cut you off. It's an identity thing. So those guys have talked about it. They've given advice. They've made videos saying this is how you do it. And they have trouble moving on. They have trouble saying they're wrong. And in a sense, it's understandable. But on the other hand, I think the measure of a quality professional is how quick he's ready to, let people know, hey, there's a better way. I was doing it this way. This is bad. Right. And you've done that well over the years.
I think this will resonate. I think the thing that you grew up believing was once you hit a plateau, there had to be another level of intensity you had to tap into. And you had to train. That's where the drop sets, the strip sets, the forced reps. John Meadows was my best friend for 10 years. We fought like cats and dogs by the end before he passed because I was like, John, all that stupid shit, it's not doing anything. Now, before he passed, he started finally, he's like, yeah, I think you might be right. He goes, but he just loved it. He just
He
loved
loved it.
doing it.
Sure.
He just loved it. And nobody, I think it was a badge of honor for John to basically that he out-trained everybody. I hated, he used to call me, I say I hated it. I miss him every day. But he would, when he was doing his YouTube, he would call me and go, hey, he's like, I'm gonna be at such and such gym. He goes, come up here and let's shoot content and train. I'd be like, no, because like I know what that means. I'm like, I know what you're gonna do because we go in and like it looks like on his YouTube, it's different days. It ain't. We would train a whole bunch of stuff. Dude, at the end of the day, you ever have one of those sessions that are so long at the end of the day, you could feel like your heart's racing like 6 hours later, you know what I'm talking about? You're hot. And I'm like, we would have those. And I'm like, I like, why do you do this? And like we had one out in Vegas. It's up on his YouTube. Me and him and Chase Savoy. And we did a leg day. I'm not kidding. We did a leg day and we did quads at this one gym and then drove across town and did glutes and hamstrings. And I couldn't walk for like 4 days. I wanted to punch his face in so bad. We went to the mall to get yogurt, man. I almost fell down the stairs. Like we had in the mall walking down the stairs. Like my adductors and glutes and everything were so sore. And I couldn't even walk. Like my feet hurt. I remember like because like he had us doing cluster sets on hack squats and then sets of 20 on leg extensions. And then it was like a 2 hour quad workout. And then we go across town. And so it's like 4 hours like
Yeah.
of stuff. And then like I couldn't even walk. And I remember we were sitting eating yogurt, and I literally looked at him. I said, "If you weren't my best friend, I'd punch your. I think what did I say? I'll punch your chest or your back right now." I was like, I could barely get through the mall, but he would always do that. And I think people would seek John out for training because John was good at like driving people into the ground. Now the thing is that legitimately is, like you said, it's counterintuitive because you think I'm training this hard, it has to cause muscle growth. Nobody wants to hear this. One of the things I figured out over the last couple of years is that truly productive hypertrophy training is actually not that hard. If I'm doing 5 or 6 reps and leaving 1 or 2 reps in the tank, but I'm consistently seeing progressive overload, it's really not that hard. Now, heavy training can after a while take a mental toll on you because, like, man, if I go and I do hip thrust, I have to load up to almost 900 pounds, and that gets old after a while. Or any of my back work is always like 7 plates on T-bar rows or stuff like that. And the heavy stuff kind of takes you just get tired of going in and you're like, oh, I got to like load, I got to drag all these plates across the gym and load this up to this degree. That I found does like take a kind of a mental toll. And then when you find that happening, I feel like what you hit is like a mental plateau of like, I don't have the enthusiasm to load up 500 pounds on this road today.
Oh, so you
So
see, I'm still a little bit stuck where John was, and I could go on and say that over the years, man, I was always coming to that apex of doing less and receiving more, doing less and receiving more. My first mentor told me, "Hey, Bill, after every 4 weeks, dude, I want you to take 4 or 5 days off in a row." He's like, "You're one of my only guys that can train this hard." That's the point.
right.
He'd write me these workouts. And I'd be like, "Yeah, John, I couldn't do the last 3 exercises. I did one push up and I hit failure." And he's like, "Well, Billy, that's because you're actually training hard." So
Right.
he taught me that rest, and then it built up from there. And then I started training less frequently, taking stuff down, and I improved. Um, the some of the stuff, man, that I've gotten from you that is dramatically like changed my progress over this last year since December, my national showing, man. Um, it's been huge. I am just now starting to. One thing I applied this year, and I made tremendous gains through this off season leading up to this competition prep, was I actually tried to increase my frequency, but I lowered the amount of overall sets I would do per muscle group. So normally I would try to go in and attack each area of the said muscle group. So like if I was training my back, I would try to hit upper, mid, or emphasize each part. Now I'm doing like one or two movements per time, but I switched to an upper lower split and I like that. And now I've gone to a full body split. I really like it. And I'm just getting to the point now where I don't push out every grinder. Where if I have if I know I'm gonna just hit total failure on the next rep, I won't attempt it.
Yeah.
But I haven't got to the leaving the one full rep in reserve off yet. I'm still a big advocate of training to failure. I have my clients do it, and it's more so that I just want them to develop the mindset, to be able to develop that adaptation to recruit those more motor units. Being in that deep place, training really hard. And that goes back to guys like John, guys like Branch Warren, guys who take pride in just killing it, tearing it up, being able to give that much effort. I think it's a huge a skill set that has a lot of value. But you got to develop that first before you get to the point, like you were saying, where you have to start stripping things down to really push through to that next level.
Yeah, I think in order to be able to back off on that 1 RIR kind of stuff, which I feel like is kind of the holy grail. And I've watched that in all my groups, as soon as somebody hits a plateau and they're frustrated, I will have them reevaluate if they're training, if they've let training to failure creep back in. 9 out of 10 times, that's what it is. And as soon as they pull back off and they go to an RIR, 1 RIR, or whatever we're doing in the programming for the week, they'll see progress resume. But I do think that training to failure is important as a tool to teach people what that effort looks like. So if you don't know what failure looks or feels like, I think sometimes it can be difficult for some people to be at 1 RIR. And I think that specifically, if we get into like Gen Pop, stuff like that, not as much like real dedicated bodybuilders. They pretty much are going to go there a lot, no matter what. But like Gen Pop people, I'm really good friends with this woman who has a really successful coaching business, and she has kind of a niche of training women in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And she's like, the hardest thing she can get them to do is really high levels of effort. And so I told her that I was like, I just tell those people, if you are not making ugly faces at the end of your set, then you're not going hard enough. And that's kind of a
Yes.
like if you get like a form video and they haven't made any ugly faces, then they ain't even close. So, that's kind of a barometer I use. I think training to failure should be seen more as a tool in that way, and less as a type of stimulus that you're chasing. So when I was a 2 failure, made the argument 2 failure, et cetera, so forth and so on, until we just couldn't deny there was just so much evidence that kept coming out every time they would test training to failure against a 1 or 2 RIR. The failure group always took 2, 3, 4 days longer to recover. And that's the 1 rep difference. So that rep where you're going to failure creates an enormous amount more of muscle damage than just leaving it off, because it's a long grindy rep. And while that's going on, you got the rhyodine receptor that's just pushing tons of calcium ions, and you just have this massive degree of intracellular calcium ion overload that's happening in the cell. And that is what activates the calpains that actually do all the muscle damage. You just leave that rep off and you don't have that. The other thing that I noticed when I was looking through all of that stuff was that when they looked at EMG and you could see, and everybody bitches about EMG, but I think EMG is a good tool. You just have to understand what you're using it for. But when they would plot reps and look at basically action potentials on the plot, when they would get to that failure rep, it would drop. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. I was like, you have less motor unit recruitment happening on that failure rep than you do in the subsequent. So it's almost like those previous reps, say the one rep out, the second rep out, third rep out, they're almost always kind of at the crescendo of what's going on with motor unit recruitment. Whereas that failure rep, it was really consistent with how to dip. So I was like, so that rep is not only probably getting us a little bit less motor unit recruitment by that point, just due to fatigue within the acute fatigue within the set, but it's also causing us a lot more muscle damage. And a lot of people do not understand that when you're creating an enormous amount of muscle damage, you have pro-inflammatory cytokines, IL-6 and stuff like that, that kick in over the next few days. Your brain detects that that's in the blood, sees it as injury, and you have a reduction in motor unit recruitment. So the subsequent workouts are affected by the magnitude of the muscle damage you're creating in that workout. So people would be like, well, I'm training legs tomorrow. I train chest today. I'm like, it doesn't matter because the body still as a whole. You have one central nervous system, supraspinal nervous system. You have the spinal level central nervous system, and then you have stuff going on peripherally. And everything in the supraspinal level gets affected by that inflammation that's detected in the bloodstream. So you can't really escape that because you're just training a different muscle group.
I love what you just said, man, and how you put it as well. We've been talking about that specific subject for a long time, but you just put it into way more scientific terms than we usually do. I've got a theory about DOMS that the inflammation that you just described, building up to that level, is so. I guess that what I'm to preface that is that we don't really know why we get delayed onset muscle soreness.
Right.
So what you just described is my theory that the body, your brain detects that amount of inflammation in an area. If it's a large area like your quads, for example, then your brain is going to start to limit the range of motion, tell you not to go into those ranges because it detects danger. So that amount of inflammation, as your brain reads it, it's danger to your brain, sends that pain signal to stop you from moving through. And we know that if you take some range of motion a little bit over the course of those days, you may get less pain, right? Because it's bringing down that warning signal. I'm just speculating, obviously, because we don't know. But I loved how you put that because it ties into a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in the past recently.
Yeah, that alone is such a reason, Paul, that I'm so drawn to you and I want to have you on the show. And the reason I've thoroughly enjoyed your content so much is because you've explained so many of the things that we put into practice and that we tell others to do, and you have the um the vocabulary to put it all together, the terminologies, the actual biological systems and means by which these things happen. Um, it's really been a godsend for me. It's been like a huge confirmation when I'm doing something right, or to get a deeper
Yeah.
understanding of what we put together, logically speaking. And that's kind
Yeah.
of I when I first listened to the Mike Mentzer seminars, it was like a culmination of everything I had been working toward that made the most sense. That volume was not the true driver of hypertrophy. Um, it's to train more frequently was only if I was actually going to enable myself to be recovered enough to do it. The immense levels of effort is what creates the true changes, and so on and so forth. And now I'm getting to this point where I am having to analyze what I do. I've always been a very much training to failure advocate. I would look at the chart where it dips off and say, well, how can I know I got to the dip? How can I know I got to the highest point unless I got to the dip? And that was my argument. That's my argument for some of my newer guys that come to me or people who are newer to the high intensity training method, been training high volume for a long time. But as far as what you were saying about the damage that training to failure actually does. So for myself, I've had as little as training a body part once every 2 weeks, with like a three different workout split. And that's crazy. It's nuts compared to what the mainstream does, right? I mean, even it's super low frequency and volume, even what you would recommend for people. Um, I was still able to progressively overload on it. and that's why I got gains. So it did work for me, but I find that now I can even force a little more frequency if I shave off one of those movements. If I don't
Yeah.
fight for that grinder, I can get a little bit more. And now I'm able to train full body every third day. Sure, I don't have as much in the exercise selection, but I've got that repetition, that
I
overlap in
think
certain
that
things, and it's
I
working.
think that the
It's fun.
exercise selection thing, I don't think you need to have this massive roster of exercises that you go to.
I'm learning that
Uh,
right now.
I mean, if you do a press behind the neck and a rear delt exercise, I mean, it's pretty much that's your whole delts. Like that's you. Yeah, I mean, you can spend your whole life, and you'll see these people. I watch these guys online making content, and they'll do like a cable, like cable laterals, dumbbell laterals, a single arm cable lateral. I'm like, you just did the same movement, like
Oh yeah,
just
or the incline Smith, and then we're gonna do the dumbbell flat press, and then we're gonna do the pec flies.
It'll be like an incline Smith, and then like an incline dumbbell press, and then like some machine. Then I'm like, the bro would do like a flat barbell press, a flat dumbbell bench, and then a machine that's basically a flat press. And then he'll make fun of the kids. I'm like, dude, you're just as dumb in your own way. Like you're literally
Yeah.
just as dumb in your own way. But I don't think there's two sides going on with this now, something we talked about. So there's the maximalist group where it's like got all these broccoli haired kids that are like strapping ankle cuffs all over their body and like seat belts and everything. That was my post today. Um, I thought it was funny. My post yesterday was like kind of like making a parody about like booty chicks making bad content, and none of the women got mad. I had to block 4 guys today that all insulted me personally because I made so it's like a man thing. Like, dude, that's why women won't tell you you suck in bed because men have such fragile egos. And I'm like, if this is hitting home pretty hard, man, go look in the mirror. Like, why are you strapping 19 ankle cuffs to yourself? And if you go into the caption, I actually tell you there's good information in the caption. I'm like, here's when you need more stability and here's when you don't. But as far as the exercise selection thing, um, I think you, I've narrowed it down to maybe like 12 exercises that you
Yeah,
could basically
that's what
like
I've
that.
come down to as well, man. Like following along, testing the theories, and when I would do something, you would confirm it, and it's like I just started shaving so much stuff out,
Yeah.
and it's really not
Well,
necessary.
I remember Doc Ken had this really, really great quote. It's pretty simple. And I don't remember exactly what it goes. I don't know if you guys remember Doc Ken. Doc Ken listener was um, he was a chiropractor. He was a high intensity training proponent. Um, he was just like an amazing dude. And he had this great quote. He wrote a bunch of articles for Milo, the strength training newsletter, Milo. And he said at the end of the day, it all comes down to like lifting a little bit more than you did in the previous workouts. He goes, but don't you think if you got to where you could like if you were squatting, I don't remember what it was, but the gist of it, if you could squat 455 for 20 reps and do stiff-legged deadlifts with like 500 for like 10 reps and do like dips with like 300-pound strap run, like for he's like, don't you think you'd be big? He's like, don't you think you'd be big and really strong? And I'm like, well, yeah. And that's the whole point all along, is that if you have 10 or 12 really solid, stable exercises that you can progressively overload that you enjoy doing, and you get insanely strong on those, what, you're gonna be small? What, you're gonna be
No,
small?
Yeah. Yeah.
impossible, impossible.
And I have trouble getting guys to understand the simplicity of this and the fact that really good, productive hypertrophy training is very simple looking on paper.
Oh, dude,
You're
it's ridiculous how silly it looks on paper. Yeah, I've given
that's
client a program that is like 7 sets for the day, and it's like, dude, what is
right.
this?
Yeah. Man, it's keep it simple is stupid, right? But if you
Yeah.
just say keep it simple, people don't understand. They can't like internalize it. It gives them cognitive dissonance. And then if you say keep it simple, stupid, they get mad. So it's really hard to get through with this concept to anybody who's an experienced lifter. And then, like you were saying for the gen pop, that was my wheelhouse for like many years. I was training for a long time. training jam pop in the commercial gyms and stuff. And teaching people to fail, to get to failure, so you can then back off, is by far the hardest thing to get people to understand. And I love that you said the ugly face thing, because that also was a barometer for me. And for women have a really hard time making the ugly face in the gym. They just don't want to make the face because they don't want anybody to look at them or see them when they're in the gym.
That was I did a few years of like I had some women clients I trained for like weddings and stuff like that, and it was my biggest hurdle to get them to overcome was that whenever it started getting hard, they would start laughing. I don't know if you ever went through that.
Yeah, I've had that too.
A very weird response at first, is because they didn't want to make those ugly faces, and they didn't, like, they knew they were having to exert themselves, and I'm like, and I would have to get them to understand it's okay, make those ugly faces, like nobody cares, like everybody in the gym is making ugly faces. Nobody looks at another person who cares about an ugly face. And then once they could get to where they could make ugly faces in their set, they would see the progress they wanted. And I always use that as a barometer. I'm like, if you ain't making ugly faces, your gains aren't going to be coming. Now, it didn't mean, of course, like coming back to the failure thing. I still think if you're training to 1 hour, you're probably making a couple of ugly faces by the end. But getting people to understand, training to 1 hour is still hard training. Like if you're doing a set,
there's an even simpler barometer. It's just velocity loss. I mean, are you pushing and it's slowing down no matter how hard you push? That's great money. That's when it's starting to happen. That's when it's happening right there. There's your mechanical tension. Like,
and I think like the other thing, when you've been training long enough, people would lose their shit at me for this. You know this as well as I do. When you've been training long enough, you know when there's not another rep there. You know, if you were to attempt another, it's not going. To me, that's us hitting failure. Like, that's me hitting failure. People are like, well, you didn't tip the other up. I'm like, I don't need to.
I don't better. Need to. Yeah, I'll stop. I'm scared. Like, I know something's going to go bad if I try to fight through that. That's my mentality on it. And that's where I started shaving reps off when I'm doing heavy stuff for my legs, because it's like, okay, that's not worth the risk to push one more. You know?
I actually have found that's a really great point. I actually found, that's what I actually use is just velocity loss. As soon as even when you're training heavy, the first rep is slow. Sometimes people don't realize
it
that.
is.
You're doing
it's one of the hardest ones is to get that first rep up. But once you do, it's like it clicks everything into place and the rest of the set rolls. Yeah.
Second rep always feels easier than the first.
Absolutely.
From that, well, it's due to the stretch shortening cycle and the stretch reflex, but I use velocity loss. So once I feel that one rep and I can feel that it's significantly slower than the previous, I'm done right there. Cut the set. And that's where, like, I know, because people are like, how do you judge RIR? I'm like, well, if you know that that rep was significantly slower than your previous, it's not an equal drop off. The next one is either like 4 times slower than that one. So it's not like, because you go from like 1, 2, 3, and then that 4th rep is slow. That 5th rep is going to be that long grinder if you even get it. And then you have to learn, okay, so the velocity loss was, say, 20% on that one rep. And when it hits 30%, 40% velocity loss is a lot. So if you hit like 30%, you're like, that's where the set gets cut short. So there's a couple of things I try to get people to understand there. And you can test everything I give people, you can test. So when they try to argue with me, I'm like, well, I mean, go test it. And you're going to come back to me and tell me I was right. So if you do a set of 10 to failure, couldn't got an 11th rep or even tried for it, take a 3-minute rest and come back, you will have lost a lot of reps if you stay at that same load.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
If you do a set of 5 or 6 and you leave 1 rep off, you can come back to that same load and still almost always get 5 or 6.
Oof.
Yep.
That's heavy for me because that's how I judge everything. Is I always use that kind of. That's where my logic goes. Is that, hey, if you can't replicate that set again, then that means it was productive and you got everything you possibly could have out of it. I'm not saying that's what you're telling us right now, but that is, I guess that's my justification to train in that very intense way or getting so close to
then
that red line.
I'll give you this to chew on.
Yeah, I know. I got a lot.
the load that you're moving is a representation of your motor unit recruitment.
Correct.
So if I do take 300 pounds and I do 5 reps with it and I leave if I do go 1 RAR and I rest 3 or 4 minutes, fully recovered, come back, I can almost always get that 300 for another set of 5. Now, 5th rep on that second set might be way more grindy, but what is that telling you? That's telling you got near equal motor unit recruitment on those 2 sets. So if I got near equal motor unit recruitment on those 2 sets, did I get the most productivity out of those 2 sets as possible? Well, if you use a heavy load, 5 or 6 rep max, then you already have maximum motor unit recruitment from the very first rep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I do a set of 5, leave that 6 rep off, come back, adequate rest, and I get another set of 5, did I get maximum motor unit recruitment? Yeah. So now I've got 2 really productive sets that I can log. But if I take that first set and I go to task failure and I come back, let's say it was 5 or 6. Let's say I go ahead and do the 6 rep, couldn't have got the 7. How many reps am I going to get on the second set?
3.
3. So am I now getting the kind of motor unit recruitment on that second set that I would have gotten in the other way?
Well,
No.
no.
I see where you're going with that. So,
So
let me
here's
put it
my
to you
logic. Yeah, this is
like
where we
this.
were kind of, I guess, test our perspectives against one another. I think Ben was probably going to say what I'm thinking. I'll let him go at it.
Well, yeah.
Actually,
So let's hear
can I
from.
pause this right quick and I just restart it back up? I just want to check how much data this 35 minutes has taken up, just to make sure we're good for the whole
Of
thing.
course.
I'm gonna just pause this starting recording now.
So, Paul, based on what you just said, let me put this question to you. So, you're talking about the difference between doing that one set without the 1 rep in reserve versus doing the second set, getting the same amount of reps, and having recruited the same amount of muscle fiber.
Yeah.
So, would you err towards? So, I guess my question, to be more straightforward, is which is better? Would you rather see a client fail and hit failure on that first set, or recruit the same amount of muscle fiber twice?
If you hit failure on the first set, there's a couple of things that happen on the subsequent sets. Number one, you have a reduction in fiber force. So the fibers at the top of the limit, one of the reasons why you have such a dramatic drop off in strength is because you have that reduction in fiber force. So when you train to failure and you get that massive influx of calcium ions in there, you get something that's called excitation contraction coupling failure. So, and then you also potentially get a loss of sarcolemma excitability. So when that happens, one of the reasons why you see that drop off in strength from going to failure is that failure rep caused that to happen. So the subsequent set is nowhere near as productive now due to you doing that. And that's why I tell people, if you're going to train to failure and you're doing multiple sets, you go to failure on the last set you're doing for that muscle.
Right. So there's some context. So when we're talking about that, because we're always 1 set to fail, like religiously, right? And when we say fail, we're saying we're including 1 rep in reserve, potentially for those who know how to hit failure. If you're more in the beginner phase and you don't really know what failure feels like, then I want to see people mechanically fail.
Yeah, I want to see
right?
total velocity loss, complete cessation of the implement.
So what you're talking about is for people who are training multiple sets, not necessarily the 1 set to fail. Correct me if I'm wrong.
If you're just like doing like a full body and you're just doing 1 set per exercise for a muscle, sure, if you want to go to failure, that's fine because you're not doing a follow-up. I don't.
Okay.
That in my opinion is not the most effective way to train for maximize hypertrophy. You need a sufficient amount of sets to maximize myofibril protein synthesis so that you get a big spike and that you get a long tail. So in order to get a big spike and get a big long tail, you have to use a multi-set approach. Now, the single set approach can work if you're going to get some growth, but are you going to maximize it comparatively to using a multi-set approach? No, this has been tested over and over and over and over again. So if we want a high expression of myofibril protein synthesis so that the body is going to end up making as many new proteins as possible, then that is going to happen by way of doing a multi-set approach. Now, I don't believe in high volume, but I believe in, say, a 2 to 4 set approach for a muscle group within a session. So generally what we have seen in the myofibril protein synthesis data is that 3 sets gives us a very, very robust stimulus of myofibril protein synthesis with a pretty long tail. And this is why that the whole frequency thing that's getting debated all over ends up showing over and over and over again that if you're using a multi-set approach 2 times a week and 3 times a week, kind of wash each other out. Now, there's a multitude of other physiological reasons that is. But if you're trying to maximize your growth within that session, the growth stimulus from that session, what a guy like Terrence Ruffin got from me was exactly that you're going to have 2, 3, maybe 4 sets that you're going to leave that failure rep off. And now you've got 2, 3, 4 sets that are super highly productive. When we're just leaving that repetition off, that doesn't actually give us as much motor unit recruitment and just increases both our acute fatigue peripherally within the session and then the amount of muscle damage that we got to recover from in the subsequent days. So that failure rep, honestly, is just kind of a shit rep. So if we're trying to maximize the growth stimulus within the session, we don't want that rep in there. And if it is going to happen in there, you'd want it to happen on the last set for that
on the
muscle
back
group.
end. So I guess maybe where I was confused or uneducated, to be frank, is that I'm under the this is my understanding, that those largest motor units that produce the most force also tire out and get exhausted the quickest. I was under the impression that once you activate those, you see, I'm not educated enough to step further as like the mechanisms that happen when you activating those largest ones, what is actually causing the growth. So my thoughts were, okay, if I activated them and tired them out, then there's nothing else I can recruit out of that muscle. I'm fine to move on because I have stimulated the deepest parts that my current level of perception can activate.
I can, that's definitely like a Mike Mincer.
Yeah, it is. That
kind
is.
of motor thinking. So that was like Mike's thing, was like the failure rep was what caused the switch to turn on. Well, the switch gets turned on when we have 2 mechanisms occurring, when we have a very high degree of effort and a slowing of contraction velocity. That's the 2 things that we're looking for to be happening within the set to give us stimulus, right? So if we have a high degree of effort, you get a high degree of motor unit recruitment. So you're pushing very hard, you get a high degree of motor unit recruitment. If the bar speed is slowing involuntarily, which means you're pushing as hard as possible, but it's still slowing, that's mechanical tension on the largest fibers, the fibers that we can recruit. That's because the myosin is attaching to actin and pulling on it, and it's at the sarcomere level. It's the force-producing part of the muscle fiber that's pulling on that, and that is the mechanical tension. So if you set your training up properly, you can maximize as much motor unit recruitment. You still have fatigue that happens. You do 1 set, there's some fatigue that is accrued. When you do the second set, that accrued fatigue reduces the amount of stimulus that you can get out of the second set. Now, the magnitude of what that is reduced by all depends on how you approach that first set. So if you do high reps for that first set, you kill in that second set.
Dramatic.
If you do high reps to failure on that first set, you really kill in the second set.
For sure.
And you should know this because, Billy, if I had you go in and do a set of 20 reps and I keep that same load on the bar and go back, how many are you going to go in the second set? Maybe like 7?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay. So now cut your reps by more than half on the second set. So you're not climbing up very high on that motor unit pool, right? That's what that's a representation of, right? Like those action potentials, right? They travel down the spine, get to the motor neuron, and they innervate all the muscle fibers that those motor neurons control. So if you can't get high up on that motor unit pool, then that's where your strength expression is representing that, hey, I can't get back up there because this fatigue exists. So fatigue within the session. But if you take 300 pounds and you do it for 5 reps and leave 1, kind of that, I would say it's almost like a 1.5 RIR, right? It's kind of a 1.5. So if you do that 5 reps at 300 pounds at 1.5 RIR, and you come back and you go do the second set and you got 5 reps again, and it's maybe kind of like a full 1 RIR. Those are the most stimulating sets you can do. And we want to accrue as many of those as possible. So then
And you're saying the research shows that if you do that twice, you can add a third, and that will show you the most growth potential.
So I pieced all this together looking and saying, okay, so if we know training to failure creates more muscle damage, let's go back to the rep ranges for a second. I'll give you guys how I arrived at everything. So we have some really good studies that looked at velocity loss for different rep ranges and said, like 12 people were like, you guys remember when everybody was having meltdowns over me saying no reason to do more than 4 to 8 reps, and people all over the place was mad as hell like that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pull that out of my ass. So we have some really, really good data that shows the difference in taking a set of 12 to failure and a difference in taking a set of 8 to failure is pretty big.
Oh, sure.
From a velocity loss standpoint. So, and this difference in a set of 4 and 12 is 3 times as much velocity loss. So that means every set of 12 you do a set of 12, do another set of 12 to failure, the velocity loss is incredible. So you just dropping the degree of motor units that you can recruit each set, like huge. It was only something like 27% in sets of 4. Whereas in the sets of 12, it was like almost 70%. Or it might have been lower on the sets of 4. It might have been like, it was very low. So it wasn't much. So I look at that and I was like, well, that we already knew high rep sets cause, there's another study that looked at high rep sets and sets to failure. And within the session itself caused a massive drop off. We already knew this. I don't know why they didn't test it, but massive drop off in the subsequent amount of reps that we could get in those sets, right? So you do a set, like we just talked about, set of 12 to failure, and then you do the second set, you get a big drop off in reps. Whereas if they left 1 or 2 RIR, they didn't see that. We already know that from practical experience. So, and then we had a ton of other data that showed high rep sets cause way longer. High rep sets are one of the worst things you can do. Because of the fact that every repetition you do has calcium ion influx. So the longer you do that, the more calcium ions that you get come into the cytoplasm. And as I talked about, when you have intracellular calcium ion overload, that's what activates calpains. Calpains are the proteases that do protein degradation, break down your actual fibers that they need to be repaired. Okay. So the more calcium ions that we have come into the cytoplasm, the greater amount of calpains that we're going to have activated. They're going to do protein degradation, potentially apoptosis and stuff like that. So we have tons of data, repeatable, that high rep sets suck ass. Like they're just bad.
I'd agree.
So like when people,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when people say like, well, you can grow the same off a set of like 20 as you can off 5. So
but the sets suck. Your perception of what you can actually accurately measure and gauge is all fucked up. You know, if I'm doing a set of 20 on leg extensions, man, it's just there's 3 different perceptions. There's actual, oh, I'm contracting it. There's, oh, I'm tired. Oh, this burns. There's so many things that are trying to fight you away from getting to that real, true, stimulating part.
We have a study on leg extensions. I want to say it was at 25 reps or whatever, compared to like sets of 6. And it was like 4 days longer to recover from the sets of like 20 or 25 than it was from the like sets of 6 were recovered within like 33 hours, and then the sets of 20 like 4 days. So
yeah, I can do that one.
Like the high reps are bad. Anybody tells you like, well, there's a place for high reps. No, there's not. I will crush and cook anybody that tries to have that argument with me. So there's no place, especially in bodybuilding, hypertrophy world, there's no place for high reps. They don't do anything we're not getting out of a set of 8, except add on tons and tons of both the fatigue that's acute within the workout and then post-workout fatigue as well. There's no place for them. They're pointless. I saw, what was it? Wesley Visser was talking about doing sets of 25 for side delts yesterday. So I was like, I don't even, I think Wesley has one of the best physiques in all of bodybuilding. He's super well-spoken. I was like, I just can check out. I'm not gonna say anything because I like Wesley.
It's no point.
But that's just that's just stuff that permeates through bodybuilding. That's just it's so wrong and it hasn't been debunked. So, getting back to like how I got there was like, okay, so well, if we know we get a lot more acute fatigue within the session by doing higher rep sets, let's just get rid of those and just pull back to 4 to 8 reps. We know we're not getting a lot of acute fatigue. We can build around a double progression model where if I'm like doing 5 or 6 reps and I work up to around 8, I can add some load. I can come back down to 4 or 5 reps at 1 to 2 RIR, build back up, and it works beautifully. And we're keeping both acute fatigue within the session minimized, so we get more productive sets that we're doing, and then we're creating the least amount of muscle damage so we're not affecting those subsequent workouts. So that's what caused me to, when I started piecemealing all of it together, I was like, well, if you're training to failure on that first set, second set's going to be far less productive.
Oh yeah.
And so it zaps that second set. And then, so there's no reason to do high reps because it makes all the other sets suck, creates a ton of muscle damage. So I was like, well, I'm going to pull back and I'm going to do sets of like 4 to 8, leave that failure rep off, and progressively overload through that range. And everything went through the roof. Just went through the roof almost within like the first couple of weeks.
For sure.
So, like,
How did you get to the 3 sets?
Say what?
How did you get to the 3 sets?
So when I broke down every meta-analysis on volume that's ever been done and plotted it out, looking at what we were getting from like a cross-sectional area measurement from single set to multi-set methodologies. So it's pretty consistent in the early sets. If you look at Krieger's meta-analysis, Schoenfeld's meta-analysis, Courier's meta-analysis, and then the Pelin data. So I was able to look at all those and kind of like overlay them with one another. And it's for the first 3 to 5 sets, it's really consistent. And then after that, they all start to have some weird deviations. So I was like, well, I ain't doing 6 sets for one muscle in a workout anyway, because from a practical standpoint, and some people are like, well, why aren't we doing 6 sets for muscle if we know the plateau is around 6 sets? I'm like, so you're going to do six sets for chest, delts, biceps, triceps, all in one workout? I'm like, really?
Your sets for delts are going to suffer because of what you did for chest. I mean, you only have so much mental effort.
You have a limited number of what I call effective sets in any session because during the workout, you also have IL-6 that's being released in the form of myokines. And so you'll notice this by the time you've done, you kind of hit intuitively, you know, when you don't really have any more productive sets left in the workout. You kind of know that intuitively. So I've consistently found for me that tends to be around 12 total work sets in the session. It's around 12. It could be a little less if I'm doing like compound exercises because you tend to get more of those discomfort feelings from big exercises like presses, squats, RDLs. All of those give you a higher degree of like unpleasant sensation. And sensation is that afferent feedback that gets to your brain. It's like, okay, this is hard, and then reduces motor unit recruitment. So I found like probably, okay, so I'm like, how many productive sets in the workout? I figured out that about 3 sets are giving you about 92% of what you're going to get. So in other words, if 6 sets is where the plateau is, at 3, you're already getting like 92, 93% of what you're going to get. So the rest of the sets, that diminishing return just really falls off after that. So somewhere around 3 sets. And then what's funny is that's what Terrence anecdotally ended up falling under, where he continued seeing his best results, 2 or 3 sets. And nobody believed that. I'm like, but it's true. So it just doesn't take a lot of sets to really kind of get a high degree of stimulus, but it definitely takes more.
You were saying like 12 working sets. So our listeners are training to failure guys. So if you took those all to failure, they would dramatically reduce that number. So like for myself, you know, back 6, 7 movements with 1 hard set for each, like I am trashed by the end of that workout. Yeah. But
I think if you're taking all those sets to failure, because you're getting a higher release of myokines that happen, and you're getting a higher degree of intracellular calcium ion overload, which is reducing fiber force and all those sets. So you're making the workout less productive than it could be if you just leave the failure rep off.
Yeah.
And then you could tack on an extra set. So if you went from 1 set to 2 set, just leave the failure rep off, and you're going to get about 40% more stimulus. That's a lot. So Bill, if we were sitting here,
I'm so intrigued. This has really got me thinking about
Well, I'll
everything
put it
I've
like
been doing.
this. I'll put it like this. If I told you that you had to walk a mile for $100,000
Okay.
and okay, and then if you had to walk a second mile to get another 40,000, would you walk it?
Of course.
Of course I would.
Okay.
Without a second's hesitation.
So the second set, if you're not taking that first set to failure, can notch you about 40% more growth.
So let me ask you this, Paul. If you switch exercises,
I wouldn't do that.
You would stick to the bread and butters and you would just repeat the task.
I think anecdotally, what I've found is pick your one motion that you're going to go with for that muscle for the day and notch your volume on that and then get to your next muscle. So like if you're doing an upper day, you're doing if you're doing something for like a pec deck for chest or something, just do your volume on there.
Okay.
Because horizontal, humeral adduction trains the whole pecs anyway. I look for something that's giving me a lot of bang for my buck. So if I'm going to do my volume on that exercise, I actually do want to hit as much stuff as I can. So if you're doing something like that's why I switched over and I do all neutral grip chest pressing now, right? Like we have some pretty good data that shows neutral grip chest pressing really trains the whole chest better than a pronated grip. So if I can do a neutral grip chest press and really hit the upper pecs, but the whole pec really well, I don't need to do another pec exercise for the day. So I can do 2 or 3 sets on a neutral grip chest press. I can do a lat exercise for 2 or 3 sets. I can do a trap exercise for 2 or 3 sets. And then really, if I'm going to do delts and arms, I can do 2 sets for like laterals, 1 or 2 sets for biceps and triceps because I'm going to train them again in a couple of days. So if you flip flop that and you have another day, like where you're doing an upper day and you're like, well, I want to move whatever was on the back end of that workout to the front. So that way it's getting, better stimulus. It's not getting some of that fatigue at the end of the workout. You can move like your delts and biceps and triceps to the front and do isolation. So you can do like a pec deck at the end of that. See what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
most people, when they send me stuff, this is the only thing I'll brag at. Nobody could outprogram me. Nobody looks at, you ever see, was it that Vegas movie where Zach Galifianakis was like, he was like that idiot, but
the
when they
hangover.
were, The Hangover, when he saw like the trigonometry,
yeah. Yeah.
I see programming like that. So
You're a
like I could
beautiful
look
mind,
at, so
Paul.
people send me
Beautiful mind.
programming and my brain just goes, this is bad.
Mm-hmm.
So in my head, when I sit down, the reason why like people come into my groups and they'll be like, I've been training for 15 years. I've never seen anything like the progress that they get out of my groups.
It's all making sense to me what you're explaining. So I'll just go back to what I was doing. I was trying to use multiple exercises on the same muscle group to just bias a slightly different area, right? So
Sure, but
let's
just
say I did my
do it in the
clavicular
second.
press, and then I would do my, a little bit more horizontal adduction to get
Right.
the upper area. But in reality,
So here's the thing about that is like, remember, if you did a press and then you switched over, like, let's say you did a press and then you went, I'm going to go do upper pecs. Well, you've already got the fatigue from the
yes.
first
And then I have
exercise.
to
So,
warm up to that next
right.
movement that I'm going to be doing my working weight with. I was thinking of this as you're explaining it all too. So because I'm trying to use multiple different exercises, I've still got all that preparation that I have to get to my top sets with. Because I mean, I have bigger muscles, so I have to approach that intelligently. Like I have to warm up. I have to prepare myself to get there. And I'm listening
Right.
to what you're saying, man. I'm picking up a lot of this, and it's making a lot of sense to me that if I would shave off a rep and I could just repeat the same task again, I don't have all of that extra setup, of starting a new exercise, of going up there. I don't have the fatigue going into it. It's like, man, this is like a big pill for me to swallow for sure. And
Yeah,
and look, I don't have like I've made crazy progress every year since I started following this Minsarian approach, is what I would call it. And having this kind of this bare bones logic to it. And it's very much about limiting the fatigue. It's very much about prioritizing muscle groups by putting them first, stable, efficient movements where you can brace and isolate and get good leverages, on and on and on and on and on. But here's the point, like you were saying, man, is where can we break through a little bit more? And I've made crazy gains. Like I probably put on another 5 or 6 pounds of tissue since December. Not really, not blasting any androgens, just taking a little bit of growth hormone and upping my frequency. Lowering.
So
Yeah.
everybody was making fun of fatigue in the last year.
I wanted to mention that when you were saying it earlier. The
I
fatigue
found
demons.
So here's the thing. Those kids talking about fatigue don't know what the hell they're talking
They don't
about.
train
And I
hard
know they
enough.
don't.
If they act like it doesn't exist, they've never felt it. And I know why they've never felt it.
Well, hold on. Fatigue is not a feeling. Fatigue, that is most like being lethargic. So fatigue is literally a temporary reduction
Okay.
in exercise performance.
We're defining our
So
terms now. All right.
have you ever walked into the gym and you were tired as hell and crushed a workout? And you had,
Absolutely. So many
but
times.
hold on. But if you were to be asked, you would say, "Oh, I got some fatigue going on." Fatigue's not a feeling. Fatigue is testable. It's a testable thing.
You're right.
So one of the things okay, so motor unit recruitment is a testable thing. So let's say I can literally use an exercise to test your motor unit recruitment. So if I had you doing measured vertical jumps at the start of all your workouts, so that way we just get past the neural adaptations from learning how to jump over and over. You get a month into it, you could literally go in and test your vertical jump at the start of every workout to see how your central nervous system fatigue is, no matter how tired you feel or anything like that. So one of the things that happened over the years is people started confusing fatigue with feeling tired. That is not fatigue. Fatigue in an exercise description is a temporary reduction in performance. So we've all had days where we were tired, exhausted, had to talk ourselves going into the gym, and you can tell right away on your warm-ups, you're like, this is going to be a good one. Like I can tell when I pick up a 45 what kind of day it's going to be.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
You ever grab the 45 and it feels like a paper plate and you're like, oh, this shit is about to be on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
right.
yeah.
But sometimes you walk in the gym and you're exhausted, you're
And you're
tired.
grabbing them, it's like,
and sometimes you walk in, I don't know if you guys ever had this. This one's the worst, where you feel good and going to the gym and your warm-ups are feeling good. You get to like that last warm-up and you kind of feel that drop off and you're like, why is this happening? And that's fatigue. So
those are the mental breakers. Those break some guys once in a while,
But even
Yeah.
still, the broccoli heads haven't even experienced that performance degradation from actually training very hard.
Well, they haven't progressive overload past 17-pound lateral raises. So I don't really.
Yes, sir.
I don't
100%. Yes, sir.
So when they talk about fatigue, they don't know what you're talking about, because I'm like, well, what causes fatigue and how do you measure it? They don't know. They can't answer it. But then on the flip side, it was all the dumb bro meatheads who were making fun of the broccoli kids because they were like calling it the fatigue demon and all this kind of stuff. And it was even some of my friends. I'm like, all of you need to shut the fuck up, because none of you know what you're talking about, because it was just irritating the shit out of me, because I had spent years getting into Marcora's like model of fatigue, looking at how fatigue happens, how we hit task failure. And it's just all these kids and then dumb bro meatheads arguing with each other. And I'm like, none of you are actually right or know what you're talking about.
That's why I
So
wanted you
we
on,
talk,
because you sit right in the middle of that spectrum. And I see
I'm
that
not
from both sides coming at you.
I'm not in either of those tribes. I am my own man. I am not in
Yeah.
either of those tribes. So when the kids would talk about fatigue, they didn't know what they were talking about, because fatigue can exist peripherally, where you have a reduction in fiber force, or it can exist at the spinal level. And that happens usually due to repeated contractions. So the actual signal that comes down, the action potential, is actually lessened. So when it gets to the motor neuron, you have less of a signal. The signal is not as strong. And then you have supraspinal fatigue, which means the size of the signal that you can create when you give effort. And the size of the signal determines how much motor unit recruitment that you can get. So when we talk about fatigue, we have to talk about all of the different mechanisms that can reduce any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what those are.
Right.
So I've even heard them try to talk about it, and I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You just need to stop talking about fatigue. So how I got training to go, like really going again, was finding every way I could reduce acute fatigue within the session and then post-workout fatigue. So those subsequent workouts were not affected. So the post-workout fatigue is almost always happening due to muscle damage.
Yeah.
So if I can keep
that
muscle
extreme rep off at the end, you're going to prevent that.
We've
Yeah.
already cut off our high reps, right? We're not doing any intensifiers anymore. We're
No.
working in a lower rep range. So we just knock off that rep to failure. Now we've taken that away. So now we've basically eliminated as much of those fatigue mechanisms as possible for the post-workout fatigue. So the acute workout fatigue means that we aren't taking those sets to failure work. So they all compound on each other. So it's like it ends up being the same stuff. So if we're not doing high reps, we're using heavy loads, we're not going to failure. We're not doing excessive volume. We're definitely not doing a ton of length and position stuff. So if we do have a length and position, because you can't get away from it for some muscles, like you got to train the pecs in a more length and position. You got to have at least one length of position for like the quads, so you can't get away from some, but you don't volumize those, because here's what happens with those. When you stretch a muscle, you get it to a longer length, you open up something called the stretch activated calcium ion channels.
Boom.
And
There it is
so
again.
those open up and just pour a bunch
Pour
of
'em
calcium
in.
ions. So that really, and we have, what's the other thing is we have tons of great data where if you compare leg extensions to leg press, and it's like takes about 4 days longer to recover from the leg press. I'm like,
Hell
no
yeah, it
kidding.
does.
It does, right? So longer
Hell
length
yeah, it
stuff takes
does.
longer to recover from. So it's not because it's a compound exercise, because it's just you're training at a longer muscle length.
It takes me 4 times longer to get off the machine after my set.
Right.
It's like it's brutal.
So
So what you were saying,
you can actually test that within the workout too, and I've done this myself. Is that everything that I talk about, I always test on myself.
for sure.
So I go in the workout, and you can test this one day on yourself. Pick nothing but short position movements for a muscle, and train a bunch of high volume to failure. You will feel fine through the whole workout. I did this with glutes. So I did a bunch of a hip thrust. I did kickbacks. I did bent knee glute raises. I was like 15, 17 sets,
Yeah.
all to failure. Felt fine.
But if you did three
I
sets
did,
of stiff leg deadlifts
I
or
did
RDLs,
one set of RDLs to
and you're
finish, and I was
fucking
done. I
yeah,
was done.
yeah, man.
You can test it. You can test it. Tell people, go test it.
I've done it.
So length and position stuff doesn't just cause more muscle damage. You get a significantly higher spike in myochondria in the set from doing that stuff. So um, it's you want to keep that stuff low. So if we have very little fatigue happening within the workout, we're getting a lot of highly productive sets done, and then we're not affecting the next day workout very much.
Right.
So
I keep going back in retrospect. I listening to your content to confirm the things that are working. And now I'm looking back in retrospect and seeing everything you're saying fully playing out, right? The only reason that I'm able to train every third day now is because I have less sets of failure for a muscle group across the board right? Because in the previous sessions, I would have 3 different exercises, blast them all through. My recovery times, it took me that long before I could go back into the gym and get progressive overload. Now I've taken some of that stuff. It's almost bare bones, bare minimum, 1, 2 sets for a muscle group in the given session. And I'm able to get back on that third day. If I wanted to take it even further, now I could get even more gains off of it by not ripping those grinders through, staying on the same exercise, get another hard set, 5, 6, 7, 8 reps in it, then move on. What happened? What are you gonna say when I'm 20 pounds heavier next year, Paul?
I'll say I will be so incredibly happy for you. Like I know, like when I worked with Terrence months ago to redo, he had everything really close. There was a couple of things. Sequencing of the workout matters too. So like there were a couple of things we had to do with some of his sequencing, but it's just amazing to work with when I had talks with like really high level guys, how much stuff I had to change in their training. Terrence, I didn't, because he had been making changes for the last 2 years based on all of my content, and that's why I saw so much growth. But it's amazing when I have conversations with some of these really high level guys, and I just look at their program and it's like, what the fuck are you doing, bro? But like I said, on paper, when you really understand, when you understand Henneman's size principle of motor unit recruitment, when you understand, this motion trains the majority, like guys would get crazy about stuff like pecs. Well, I got to do this motion. I got to do this motion, and whatever. And I'm like, but really, you can train your whole pec in like 2 exercises. Like you could in a pec deck and a neutral grip press. It trains the whole pec. So like you don't need this conglomerate of a bazillion exercises. You know, if you're training lats, like the best lat exercise you can really kind of do is a wide grip pull down. So like
I never did wide grips, man. I've always done something that's just a little bit outside of shoulder width. I
so
find that I just like to be able to keep my elbows. I get a really good contraction with the elbows tucked and trail it alongside me. And I
right.
find that like the force is wonky, wide. I don't know because I don't have
So
that. I don't know.
why to moderate grip? I mean, there's not a huge difference. If I'm being super pedantic
Okay.
about it, like a wide grip is a little bit better, but a moderate grip on like a frontal plane pull down is consistently, like in all of the EMG studies, shows the greatest amount of lat activation. But my point is, like, you only need like something through the
Yeah,
sagittal plane, something through the frontal plane. That's the whole, like, that's the whole lat. It's
that's
your
the
whole
Yeah,
mat.
lat plane.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
only, if you want to do something different in there because you get tired of doing an exercise, cool. But you need 2 lat. You could do 1 lat exercise, train your whole lat. If you want 2 for variety, choose 2. For your upper back, your traps, you're doing scapular retraction.
Dude,
I mean,
you're the scap rows, the Kelso shrugs.
yeah,
That changed the game for me. Like, cause it was in 23. I'm looking at my stage shots. Like, okay, I need more detail. I have so much mass in my back. My back is so thick, it's so wide, but I need more detail in the upper back. And it's like the scapular rowing. You
yeah,
know, the chest supported scapular row or the Kelso shrug, like on a low angle hammer strength machine. Dude, completely transformed my back. Like,
right. And
and
like
in this
when
prep, as I'm getting leaner, it's even crazier. Like my traps are sticking off my back that
right.
far now.
And so like that was like when Terrence and we evaluated, because like clearly like the guy, Mike is the guy, right? That he's going to be looking at, that he's got to beat.
Yeah.
So like that was why we were talking about. I was like, he was like, what do I need to do for lower traps? And I was like this. And I gave you that. And like immediately when you go in, you're like, oh my gosh.
Oh
So
yeah.
like when guys come to me and at that level and they're like, I need this muscle, I usually know like what do we need to do for that muscle. But if you're doing scapular retraction, you're training the whole trap from top to bottom. But if you're like, I need a little more, because you can be a little more dominant with one division of a muscle over another. So like the traps, you have the upper traps, and they don't even attach to the scapula; they attach to the clavicle. So then the mid traps and the lower traps are on the scapula. But if you do a Kelso shrug, the upper traps translate the clavicle posterior, so they pull the clavicle back, and the other traps do scapular retraction. So you're training the whole trap that way. But if you need something, like if a guy's really deficient, because he could have, say, really strong mid traps, and they're doing like, well, I'm going to do most of the work. So if he needed lower traps, like Terrence felt like he needed more lower traps, then we give him like a lower trap raise. So at that level, sometimes guys do need kind of a more specialty exercise because something has become dominant and they now they have something that's lagging. Now the average Joe will have that too, but I always tell them, they even come into my groups and I don't know if they get mad at me or whatever, but I try to keep things in perspective about where you're working from. I'm like, dude, you work down at Best Buy and you just want to have a 6 pack at the beach. You don't need to specialize on the lateral head of your triceps, okay? So like you don't need that, dude. Just get stronger. Like
Like Mike Mitzer would say, oh, they look at the program and they don't see the concentration curl for the outer third of the bicep, and he'd say, worry about growing a 20-inch bicep first. You know.
Dude, it's amazing that if you just focus on getting stronger, the performance stuff that we talked about earlier, you'll get larger. And then when you get larger, it fixes most of those problems. Like if you
Yes.
just get it as large as possible. And then once you kind of max out to a level that the average person says like you're jacked, and then if you have some of that going on, sure. Or if you're competing at a very high level, sure. But I don't know. People ask me like, well, why don't you include this or why don't you include that? I'm like, oh, does my Olympia qualification depend on me making sure that muscle group is brought up? Because I don't think it does.
Yeah.
So that's how I am with the average guy. I'm like, dude, I'll ask him that. Does your Olympia qualification, depend on you winning this next show? That if you don't have, enough a long head of the bicep, if you're the short head of your bicep needs to be more developed. And I'm like, you need to like have some degree of self-awareness about who you are If you want to be jacked, just get bigger overall. And getting bigger overall means getting stronger overall. So you can pick like 12 really great exercises that you like that are stable that you can progressively overload and get after those for the next 5 years. And you'd be surprised at what just doing that and having all of your other checks and balances in order are going to do for you.
100%, man. 100%.
So the show is called Iconoclast, right? Which is a play on what the Russians used to do in destroying the iconoclasts, right? The icons of a culture. And, Billy and I, we're a little bit cultist when it comes to Mike, we love Mike, and we want to drive home his principles and stuff. And everybody's fallible. That's the lesson, and so if you take a step back and you're an objective observer, you can interpret things the way Paul does. If you have that level of perception, if you're intelligent that way, right? Paul has a beautiful mind for programming, and he can read research and apply it. And that's, research doesn't mean a damn thing if you can't apply it and turn it into something tangible. So these are big skills, Paul, and I think is the reason that you've been so consistently relevant, as we discussed in the beginning, you and Brett, right? Like who's relevant and how long and why, right? And it's guys that can produce results. So guys that can interpret the data and then apply it. So I think Billy and I can take an intensity step back, in terms of like how much we worship Mike and how much we want to drive home his principles, because even Mike is fallible, right? Nobody is infallible in this game.
I think what you have to remember about this is that Mike was such a critical thinker. He was working from, before before he went off the deep end with like the meth and all that stuff. But what I loved about Mike was he was a critical thinker. My own mentor, Charles Poliquin, which a lot of people don't even remember at this point, but Charles was the man for decades.
Yes,
he trained over 50.
Charles,
He trained over 50 gold medalists. I mean, he didn't get everything right.
That's right.
He trained over 50 gold medalists, made them better. And he didn't get everything right. There was a lot of things that he was wrong on. And it means that we're just all humans and we're not going to get everything correctly. We're going to be wrong about stuff. But what comes back to guys like that is I feel like that they're still ahead of everybody else because they're doing a much better job of critical thinking. And then they actually do the application of it. So you take a guy like Mincer, and it's easy to pick apart things that he said, but nobody was trying to think back in those days. Arnold and all those jackasses, they were just doing 20 sets of muscle group and then taking like, what was it? I think the drug back in that day was D-ball. And what was the injectable? Was it Deca? Was the Deca the one that everybody...
Deca was the big one. I mean, they had Bowling and Masteron, but they were just doing stupid shit like eating tons of D-ball or running Deca only cycles.
There was it Sergio Oliva? Was like there was I remember some quote about like just like take a handful.
Yeah.
Like never. One of the quotes I remember was never waste a syringe and take a handful, and that was like kind of the methodology. So in other words, every syringe was full, take a handful. So Mike was trying to at least apply critical thinking, and same for Arthur Jones. Right.
Yes.
So they were trying to apply critical thinking. They didn't have access to what we have access now. So here's where I was going with that. 100%. If Mike was alive today, he would have changed some of his theories based on science because he was like that.
For sure.
So I think in a way, I kind of get to carry on some of that legacy because I'm like, if Mike was
yes, sir.
I think if Mike was alive, he would look and say, I had tons of phone call conversations back with him in the day. Really? So, yeah, I used to call and he would answer and we would talk for hours. And
that's so cool.
So from the time I was like 15 years old, I was like this. So Mike was such a thinker, but he didn't have the internet. We didn't have all the studies that we have now. And a lot of the stuff he was close, right? He was close. He wasn't. So I think that because of who he was and the way that he thought, I think that he would have said no different than Charles if he was still alive. I think they both would said, here's where I've changed how I believe because we had this data or whatever. And I think that Mike would have done that. I think Mike would have been like, I used to think that the muscle building machinery was turned on to that failure rep. But now we understand because Mike was big on talking about fatigue too. And if you go and listen,
100%. That's
he talked a lot about how fatigue was the greatest enemy of making muscle building progress. And it is.
and it
And it
is.
is. And I think over time he would have seen all the data we have now and he would say, that failure rep just really kind of an asshole. Like we don't need that guy. Let's just take that guy off. And I think he would have looked at, if you go back and look at Mike's, what he called his most productive routine. I've posted it before. It's so close to being spot on. It's so close. It's really so close. And if you talk to the people who actually watched him train, he trained a little differently than what he wrote. And he trained heavy, low reps. He was strong as hell. He basically did a little bit more volume than he espoused, and that
he
tends
always
just
had
to be
he always had the caveat of that, not everybody was going to be the genetic
right,
specimen that could handle it all, or that,
right.
Don't train like the people on drugs. and like you said, hey, logically, you could start at one. Are you progressing? See what happens, sort of
That's
thing.
what I tell people. I was like, we already know. So like I'm like, well, if you want to start, if a place to start from, one set twice a week is a place to start from. And then if you want to go to two sets twice a week, go to two sets twice a week. But start at the what we know now is like the least amount that is going to actually give muscle growth. Even if it's like a tiny minuscule amount, you're not shrinking. So if you can start there. And Mike had that same philosophy, is like, well, where's the logical place to start? It was like at one set. So if you see progressive overload, he was big on progressive overload.
Absolutely.
And,
That's where I learned
he
it
was
from.
big on the fact that you got to be lifting more weights for more reps over time. And these are like, Mike had so many like solid foundational principles that he built this up that got lost over the years and all that, this stupid bullshit. So like Mike was huge on, if you aren't lifting more weight for more reps a year from now, you aren't going to look any different. And like, and that really got lost in bodybuilding for a long time through once it became more of a hormonal chemical process. I think it was worse in some parts of the 80s and 90s. Dorian was kind of an outlier in that way, because if you go through Dorian's training logs, he outlines every mesocycle. Here's my load and reps I need to hit in this next training cycle. So he knew I had to be lifting more weight for more reps. It's wild that we've had to circle back to progressive overload being the feedback mechanism that our training is working when people.
It's the evidence. It's how
it's
know
the evidence
that your
like your
program is
training is
successful.
working. Like, bro, like when people like, even like Bromley, coming on, like, not to give him any more airtime, but I'm like, I don't care about your fucking volume, dude. I'm asking you this. Can you take that load and turn it into your warm up over the next 6 months? Because if you can't, I don't care. I don't care. That's what everything is. Are you lifting more load for more reps in 6 months from now? And if you're not, you didn't progress. I don't care about what you think you look like. What do you think produces force? Functional proteins. Then we have other neural adaptations that we can add, everything from tendon stiffness to a reduction in co-contractions to better coordination, all that kind of stuff. But I'm saying we have great evidence that shows there is a congruent relationship between how much stronger we're getting and how much cross-sectional area we're adding. So what produces force? The actual sarcomeres that you're adding to the muscle. That's hypertrophy. So if you aren't moving more load for more reps in 6 months from now, you didn't grow. You didn't grow. I don't care. I don't care. You didn't grow. I don't care what you think you look like.
So Mike was saying to start at a simple logical place, one set. So what I feel like I'm hearing from you, Paul, is that you've kind of compiled through analyzing meta-analysis from a number of very prolific and good exercise scientists where to stop. Right, that third set. So maybe elaborate on that for me a little bit more. Is that the best place to stop, and why?
I think that's always going to come back to individuality. So
thank you for saying that. That is,
I think that'll come back to individuality, and I think it'll come back to how you're structuring your training. So let's say a guy has gone up to 3 sets, and then he's like, I'm going to try 4, and he goes to 4, and he's still seeing progressive overload that's occurring. And then say he goes to 5 and he doesn't see it, then he knows he's got to come back to 4. But you have to have some degree of being your own. I used to call it being your own Doc Brown. Remember Back to the Future, Doc Brown was a scientist. And I was like, you have to be your own lifting version of Doc Brown, and that you have to get into the gym and you have to kind of massage your programming a little bit to figure out where's this sweet spot for me. And I always tell people what you're looking for is where you're seeing the greatest amount of progressive overload occurring with the least amount of volume. There's a relationship going on there. So if I add another set and maybe like I'm kind of like every once in a while getting another rep, every once in a while, not that often, and then I pull back one set and I see maybe I'm still getting that same degree of progressive overload, that other set's not really doing anything.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to use your progressive overload as the feedback mechanism as to how well my training is working. And a lot of guys, they don't do that. They just want to be told, here's the number of sets you got to do. And I'm like, no, you have to start at a baseline and then actually logbook your training and then see what's producing results. Your progressive overload is telling you the magnitude of the results that you're getting.
You're saying the same
you should know this, Billy. Like,
we say, it's a set of heuristics. It's a set of principles that you have to apply and test on yourself. And here's the feedback mechanism: is progressive overload happening? What you're doing is working. Here's your variables.
Sometimes guys will get married to that. Like you were saying, you add the 4th set, maybe you get that one extra rep. Maybe it's the first time, maybe it's the second time because you kind of dedicated to seeing if it's going to work. And then you get married to that. Right. And then you can't figure out why you didn't get it on the 3rd time or the 4th time. Or why can't I go to a 5th set?
You have to be able to emotionally detach yourself from stuff. Yeah. Just look at the numbers. It's just numbers. So you have to be able to look at your logbook and be like, I added a 4th set, kind of meh. And then I'm going to take that 4th set back off. And if I'm still progressing at the same rate, then I know that 4th set was not giving me anything. And then at that point, you just have to work massaging that stuff a little bit. So it's always individual, independent to certain degrees. Now we can work within a framework that's going to work for 90% of most people. But then if you have somebody that needs a little more, a little less, or whatever, there's no right or wrong. That's the thing is, like, regardless of what people say about me, I'm not dogmatic at all. Like I'm like the everybody needs to be able to go in and it's so annoying because people get mad at me when I won't give them. They say I'm dogmatic, but then I won't give them exact answers. And I'm like,
you won't give them a set prescription.
Like
how dogmatic of you, Paul.
Pick a side, bro. You can't have it's like this. It's like also like you can't tell me I look like shit and then accuse me of being on steroids. Like pick a side, bro. Like either I'm on steroids and I'm fucking jacked, or I look like shit. But just pick a side. But I'm not dogmatic at all. Like I said, if evidence comes up and says this is a better way, I'm like, is it replicatable? Do you see this repeated through the data? And then the other part is does it have practical application?
Can
we take this?
That's where these guys are going a step further from you.
Yes.
Is this 3 times a week people, the cuff people, the neurotic stuff? It's just neurotic information. All these hypotheticals that you can't even apply.
The thing about most people, they don't understand how to read data because they look at a study and use it for an argumentative piece when they don't understand what the researchers are trying to look for out of that study. So lots of times researchers are just trying to look for a specific physiological outcome, and that's why they set the methodology up the way they do. So kids or people who don't know how to read research will read an abstract and go, well, this says this. I'm like, okay, nobody's going to train that way. They were looking for something specific out of this study from a physiological outcome. They're not trying to set you up a training program. So you have to understand, what are they looking for out of this? So some studies are looking at real world application stuff where they're trying to see that. And then some studies are just looking for specific physiological outcomes based on doing this. And you have to be able to discern when that's happening. So that's another area of that I think has differentiated me, is that I can look at research and go, where's the practical application standpoint for this stuff? Does it even exist? And so over time, I developed my methodology based on, here's the fatigue, here's the stimulus, here's the frequency, here's the volume, here's this, here's that. And then how do I shave off as much? Because I call fatigue, all forms of fatigue are interference mechanisms with growth. So as much fatigue as I can pull away means the greatest magnitude of growth response we're going to get. So I was able to kind of like, I'm going to strip these parts away and magnify these parts. And then that's going to create these really dynamic and awesome training programs. And that's what I was able to do. So it for me, it's not that hard. I get like people that send me routines. I'm like, I don't even know how you wrote that down. Like, it's crazy. But I mean, like I said, if there was something I'm pretty good at, I started writing routines when I was 14. So I've always kind of had a knack for looking at programming, just kind of understand. But over the years, I've really fine-tuned what really, really effective programming looks like. And so I can look at a program now on paper and be like, this is going to smoke. This is going to smoke. And then sometimes I'll write one out, and don't ask me why I look at it for a long time. Like, I'll be like, and then I'll come back to it later and be like, this needs to go. And I don't know how. It's just something my brain can do.
I write
It's
stuff
a skill set, yeah.
for clients, and then I'm like, ooh, I want to do this one. Like, ooh,
But it
this
kind
looks
of,
good.
I know, like I wrote the 5-day upper lower off push pull leg split, and I looked at it. I'm like, man, that thing is sexy. Like, it's like I could look at it and be like, that's going to be a fire program. And I don't like 5-day splits normally, but I know how to do one so you can recover well enough to make it work.
Bingo.
And people look at programming as individual days. I see programming as one. I can see the high level overview of like the whole thing. Like, this is affecting this and this is doing this. Whereas most people, when they write a program, here's one day, here's one day, here's one day. I'm like, how does this day affect this day?
Yes.
And so I have like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different things my brain puts into play when I see a program. So I can look at a 1-day example and be like, that sucks. And then if you give me like the whole week, I can be like, your week sucks too. Like it's a microcycle. So it's like, I can be like, your week sucks too. So I don't even know how to even. And then over the course of subsequent weeks, I can write out everything that has to happen over subsequent weeks. So, and I just don't know a lot of people that know how to do that. So that's, I guess, if there was any one gift that I had, it was just been able to take all of this data over the years and just kind of refine it into legitimate practical programs.
Yeah, zooming in and then pulling back. And a lot of what I'm hearing from you is something that we often talk about, which is the pursuit of objective truth. Right? Objective truth is attacked so deeply in our society, through our institutions. Nobody wants things to be tangibly true. And often it's simply the pursuit of objective truth and the methodology that you apply, how you go about pursuing that truth, that makes things more or less real, more or less practical, more or less tangible, and replicable. So it's very impressive, and it's nice for the audience to get a window, a glimpse into your mind, your thought process through this, because it's definitely affected us. And I would even go as far to say as like, I interpreted. So we're talking about what Bill talked a little bit about some things that he's been enlightened on, possibly doing less well or wrong. But for me, I interpreted fatigue poorly for myself in the last little while. Like, I've been working concrete. I basically became like a DYEL because I'm always feeling tired, but I'm only feeling tired. I'm not really checking my output versus that fatigue. Right. And so what I think now, I feel a little bit, sort of motivated and inspired to get back and be a little more scientific with myself and kind of set that feeling of fatigue aside and go and look at the numbers. What is my output and can I progress that?
Yeah. So that's the thing, is like I said, you have to emotionally detach yourself from that stuff and just look at your numbers, because it's literally just numbers. So you have to look at your performance and say, here's my performance. It doesn't, you can always make a note and say, like, life stress has a legitimate effect on a lot of people. So when people talk about recovery and they always talk about sleep and protein, I just like, I'm gonna check out this conversation. But I mean, sleep can affect it over enough time. I try to get people away from that, the fear of like, oh, I had one bad night of sleep. I'm like, who gives a shit? We had a really cool study People still argue. They tested it. They tested it for this reason. Let them do 240 eccentric contractions of leg extensions to create as much muscle damage as possible. And then they tested them on that contrast with 48 hours no sleep, and then another time of regular sleep over 3 days, and the recovery time was the same. So lack of sleep does not affect peripheral recovery.
Wow.
So it has no effect on it. Yeah. So the actual fiber itself doesn't recover any faster with sleep. So
Great.
it's just numbers. When you're doing your log booking, it's just numbers. You're just looking at numbers. So if your progressive overload is skyrocketing, don't change anything.
Yep. 100%.
That's it. You dialed in. People will mess up all the time because they'll be like, I'm seeing good progress. Should I change? What? Happens all the time. People like, should I change to your new group? I'm like, are you crushing progress? Yeah, I've never seen it better. That makes sense. I would totally change right now. Like, and it's a FOMO thing. Like they want to do something different. I'm like, well, are you addicted to progress, or are you addicted to just being in the gym? Those are not
I'm
the same
addicted to
thing.
progress. That is something that we have said on
I
this
am
show
too. Like these
from the
people that are
beginning.
addicted to the gym is so weird to me because from the
No.
time I was young, I just wanted to progress as fast as possible.
Yes.
And if it meant I was in the gym 2 days a week, then I'd do 2.
That's
if
my
it meant that I was in the
perspective.
gym. I
100%.
don't have an emotional attachment to being in the gym. In fact, I have plenty of long periods in my life where I hate training, but I still like progress. I like progress more than being in the gym. So if I could go into the gym once a week and see the most massive amount of progress possible, that'd be amazing because I'd have 6.5 other days I could do stuff with my life.
Right.
And so
I've trained as little as once every 5 days because that's how I manipulated my variables to where I could progressively overload. That I've always said same thing that you've said. It's like it's about progress. It's about taking what's objectively true and seeing how I can apply it. I mean, you said it earlier, but that's 100% carrying on that legacy that was left behind back then. They didn't have the information. Now you're taking what's available and you're taking things a step further. How can we reduce these things that that lower our performance? All right. Hey, let's maybe shave that last brutal rep off. Let's take this volume down. Let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go here, and start to apply it together. And it makes for just something beautiful that is foolproof.
Yeah.
Young.
That was, like I said, I've always just been more addicted to figuring out what is the 100% most effective way. It's very weird to me when I watch people that are addicted to the gym, because the addiction to the gym is often the very thing getting in the way of their progress.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, don't complain about your lack of progress when you can't get out of your own way. So if you want to make better progress, be in the gym less. Don't do freaking drop sets. Don't do finishers at the end of the workout that don't do anything for you. Like that's another dumb shit. When
all that means is you didn't train.
You want a telltale sign of a bad coach. Does he have a finisher in your program? Dump that guy right away.
Yeah.
And then guys get mad about that. I'm like, do you want me to explain to you why finishers don't work? I mean, like I can, and they'll be like, well, I've seen that great progress with my clients on finishers. I'm like, no, you haven't. I just don't. I don't even enter. And then they think I'm a dick for saying. I'm like, no, you haven't. You haven't.
Well,
No,
Paul,
you just don't know how to measure it. You don't know how to measure progress. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a dick because you're not validating the erroneous shit that they're doing. They want a confirmation.
I'm not validating their shitty training methods that they have absolutely no proof to use. They'll say, well, my clients are proof. I'm like, what are they proof of? I'm like, I'm going to go back to the logbook. Show me progressive overload, because that's what we know. That's what we know is that it's the feedback that tells us something's working. So do you have that? That's it. It's really simple.
That's what I say to my clients all the time. They'll message me, hey, do you think we should change this? I said, well, have you stalled on any of your lifts? No. Okay, so that means you're growing. What do you want to change? Oh, well, I feel like, okay, well, that's a feeling. It has nothing to do with objectively if we're making progress or not. We know we're making progress.
The logbook is everything.
It's everything. Yep. Guys, we've said it. Paul said it. There it is, right there. This was really fun. I thought it was going to be more of like a formal interview where I asked you about your life and your history and stuff. But I mean, we put in the time. I've got some excellent stuff that I myself am mulling over. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna try a second set on a couple things. Like I've got some ideas right now. My priority right now is my shoulders and chest, basically my upper shelf, because I brought up my quad sweep. I brought up the size of my arms significantly. So I want to have that really powerful upper chest shelf again that I had before when my arms weren't as big, right? When my arms were smaller, everything looked way bigger and poppy. So now I want to get that back now that my legs are up to par. So on my 2 separate days, I have the first of my upper body movements is a shoulder press and a the Nautilus Nitro neutral grip press,
Yeah.
right? So like now I'm really like I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try to intentionally, leave one off and just backdoor it one more set and see what this does.
I would just leave the failure rep off on both sets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Like for sure.
Yeah, and then you're gonna see everything I told you. It's gonna happen right in front of you, and you're gonna be like, "Oh, okay," because that's what'll happen. And so you'll do if you do that first set, go heavy, 5 or 6 reps. Make sure you don't leave that failure rep off. Rest 3 or 4 minutes, go back, and you'll realize I'm hitting damn near same reps, same load, same reps on the subsequent set. Well, the only way that's possible is if you're getting very near similar degrees of motor unit recruitment, which means you're getting to mechanically load those largest fibers again.
Man,
So
I really hope those people that are calling you dogmatic get a chance to see this. And you know what? Like, if for anybody that's called us dogmatic, you were probably right. And the the flip side of that, though, is you're seeing in evidence in real time that we're able to take new information, appreciate it. We're gonna go out and apply it. We're gonna talk about it in our chats. I'm gonna start lifting again like a man. Okay, and hopefully we can come back in a few months, Paul, and see the gains that both Billy and I have had.
Stay. You guys keep me keyed in with your progress, how things are going over the next 3 to 6 months. I love to hear it.
Well, you're gonna see me
I
on
wake up
stage in about 12 weeks,
every
so.
day, believe it or not. Like I have haters. I think I have less haters now than I had the last few years. Like I said,
Well,
I
you
get a
blocked
lot
them
of
all.
huh?
I said, yeah,
Say
well,
what?
you blocked them all. I'm fucking with you.
I mean, you know what's funny is I haven't blocked anybody in a long time. I had to block dudes today because I got so mad about my post, just like making a parody about
That's a
the
thing that's said
Cubs.
about you, Paul. That was the joke. Is that everyone's like, oh yeah, he'll just block you.
You know what they
Or,
never say? They never say what they said.
they
Right.
never say what they
Oh,
said that
blocked you.
got
What
them
did you
blocked.
say?
Yeah.
They never talk about the fact that they show up and just start like unprovoked start insulting me. And I'm sorry, guys. This is the best way I can explain this. If I sent out a thing to the community and said I'm having a gathering at my house, free food, everybody attend. If a dude and his buddies walk in and he starts calling me a dick and screaming "fuck you" and insulting me, you know what's gonna happen?
I
I'm gonna
got an
kick him
idea.
out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kick him out.
He's going home.
You don't get to stay. What's crazy is that those people think they should be allowed to stay in the house.
Yeah, we live in a world without consequences, Paul.
Yes.
For people's actions, people go on the internet and they think that like when you're driving in your car, nobody can get at you, right? So you could drive like an asshole and be an asshole.
Right.
The internet is a million times worse for this. And Paul, you're the type of guy, and not that we know each other super well, but you're not ever the type of guy to call himself a victim, right? But there are so many stupid people
what's
out here victimizing people on the internet. You guys need to chill.
Dude, I think there's nothing, and I don't like to use, like we talked about this before. It's so beta to be crying about a dude blocking you. Like, here's my thing. Do you know I don't go to another dude's account to talk shit? Do you guys even think about it? Have you ever seen me on another account talking shit to somebody? No. I don't go to other dudes' accounts to talk shit. I just don't do it. I don't have, like I said before, nobody lives rent free in my head. Nobody, because I don't let them. And if somebody blocked me, then they blocked me. I don't cry about it. I don't know why these guys think they can call themselves grown men. Please put this up on like a preview or something. You don't get to call yourself a grown man if you're crying about getting blocked. You're not a grown man. You're a little baby. You're a little baby. And if you'll send me your address, I'll send you some Kleenex and a new blankie. And then you can use those so the next time somebody brings my name up, so you can get your blankie and your Kleenex and you can suck your thumb and talk about how I blocked you. But my point is, I've never, ever cried about a dude blocking me. There's lots of people that have me blocked and I don't care. I don't care. I'm like, okay, they got me blocked. Who cares? Crying about getting blocked is literally the most soy boy shit that goes around on the internet now. Is like, oh, this dude blocked me. I'm like, you were probably acting like an asshole. When I hear people like they got blocked, lots of times they were acting like assholes. If they show up on my account and they're just like talking shit to me, I'm like, what do you think is going to happen? I'm not going to sit here and go back and forth. I know there are other guys that don't care and they allow that because they just want the engagement. I don't want it. I don't want that on my page. Like, I am legitimately an educator. If you come to my page and you're respectful and you want to debate the data I put out, cool.
And you do it. You will interact.
I
You
do
will
it.
go
That's
back and
how
forth.
Nippert and I became friends, was because Jeff was respectful. We had a disagreement and we ended up like talking about it, but we ended up following each other. And I have other people that I've had show up on my account and have disagreed with what I said, and we have respectful back and forth. But the people who usually come over and I have people who, what the weirdest thing is, people who follow me that don't like me. I don't follow anybody I don't like. That's so crazy.
Yeah, that's a
And then
weird
they'll be
behavior.
like, well, you have good content, but I'm like, you don't know me as a person.
Yeah.
Like, you don't
Yeah.
know me as a person. The internet's weird, bro. It's
Yeah,
weird.
man. Well, very few fitness influencers, for lack of a better term, live in people's heads as much as you, Paul.
Nobody,
So well done, bro. Well done, man.
I have more real estate than
Oh, yes.
anybody else in this space.
I would say so. Yeah, I'd say you're the number one guy
You're
for that.
nobody,
BlackRock.
nobody, and that's not me being egotistical. I live rent free in more dudes' heads than anybody in this space.
So
Anybody.
true, bro.
I mean,
And
Not
that's
even
why
close.
that's why I wanted you of all people to come on here and like we just hash out freely and talk about this stuff because I feel like people think they have these perceptions of you. You're in their heads. You're their boogeyman. You know what I mean? They have these perceptions of you that are not based in reality. Like you want to
I
talk
don't
about
have,
dogmatic people.
there's actually only a couple of people in the entire industry I don't like, and I don't follow them. And I don't like generally go around like saying anything unless their name comes up. And if they have something to talk about from a data perspective, I don't smear them personally. But there's actually like there's only a couple people I dislike as people, and I don't associate with. But I also don't go around just like slinging shit at them. I just like I don't care for this person, and here's why. But it's very weird. Like I read, um, I don't really care anymore. Somebody's asked me, like, does it bother you? And I'm like, no. Like, if you're having kind of an overall bad day, sometimes that can feel worse. But for the most part, anybody who's talking bad about me probably has something else going on in their life that sucks.
Yeah,
So
bro. Some people are not just having bad days; they're out here having bad lives, man.
I have plenty of people that no, they don't ever talk about this. That show up in my DMs and they're just slinging nasty stuff at me, and I'll go, "Are you okay, buddy?" And they'll keep going. I had a guy email me and was just saying nasty stuff,
Dude,
and
just think about that. He sat down, opened up his computer, typed in your
right.
email address.
I ended up
That's wild.
emailing him back over and over, and I was like, dude, I was like, are you okay today? And I'm not asking you sarcastically. I'm like, do you got something going on? Like, are you okay? And he kept being nasty, and I kept responding with kindness. And at the end, he's like, fuck, I'm starting to feel bad for like talking to you this way. I'm like, what's going on in your life, man? And then he ended up confiding in me, like his mom and dad both lost their jobs, and he was having to do like these side jobs to try to help them pay bills and stuff. And you know, I ended up like talking to him for a while, and I was like, "Is there anything I can do for any of your jobs to help you, whatever?" And the dude, he was like, "Man, I'm over here crying because I like coming at you and calling you all this stuff, and you're trying to help me." Most people, and I went through a really dark period the last couple of years with like a relationship that I had that I was trying to basically, save, that took a lot out of me. And I had this conversation yesterday with with John on that podcast, and I said, I'm less bothered now that I'm out of that period in my life. I'm less bothered by people on the internet. But the best way I can put it is, if you're having a really horrible day and a guy cuts you off, you're just like that guy cutting you off. You're just enraged at that guy. But if you're in a pretty good mood and you're cruising down the highway and a guy cuts you off, sometimes you don't even notice. You're like, oh, or you'll be like, okay, come on, buddy. Or you don't even care. So now that I'm kind of in a better season of my life, I'm just less bothered. So, and then over the months, people have, I guess they've noticed that, not even noticed myself. And I started getting a lot of DMs. They're like, you're really nice in your comments now. And I started getting so many, I didn't realize that I'm just less bothered by people.
They had
So,
they had the memes of you. They would call you Call Parter. It's like, oh yeah, there's like something like random kid comments, Call Parter, go kill yourself. Like this is ridiculous shit.
so like there's the other thing, like there's so much I don't know if you've ever heard all the fake rumors. Like there's so many fake rumors. Like I've been married like 5 times, and um I've been married once.
Dude,
Like I
you
was
are.
married one time for 20 years. And so like apparently I was married 5 times, and I have all these estranged kids that won't have anything to do with me.
Oh,
And
is that right?
yeah. So, and I have an amazing relationship with all my girls, and I send them this stuff and we all laugh hysterically because people just make haters are weird because they'll make up stuff about you and tell other haters, and they just all, because they don't like you, they just go with it.
It's headcanon, man.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the real
Yeah.
story.
yeah.
Yeah, I
This none of
know.
this is new. None of this is new, right? I've been following you. I think I said to for 15 years. Probably started following your stuff in 2010, 2008, 9, 10, in that area. And I knew about, I think 4 daughters. If 3, my bad. But you can't be. I've got one, and you can't be a father of girls and not have that thoughtful side of you, right? So when people see what they see of Paul Carter, again, I hope they see this podcast, and I hope they see the human side. And like, guys, like, it's not just for Paul, it's for you personally. And Paul is sending you that message. Relax. It's the internet. You don't need to get mad.
The funny one was always because me and John Meadows were best friends for 10 years. And somebody said to me once or something, like they were like, it was like a last year or something. He's like, John would be so disappointed if he saw the person who came. And I go, yeah, I'm serious. And I said, let me ask you a question. If John and I were best friends for 10 years and I'm an asshole and John's super nice, I go, behind the scenes, do you think it is that maybe John was an asshole and I'm an asshole, or that John was nice and I'm nice? I was like, so, because we wouldn't be best friends for 10 years if he's like the super sweet, loving, nice guy and I'm this raging asshole. Think about it. Those don't work. So
No,
you have
that
to figure
definitely doesn't
out,
work.
you
And
have to
maybe
figure out.
whoever is saying this is the asshole, right? Like, you are a random person on the internet talking about 2 other grown men's relationship, and how the dude
It's
who,
so
like, God
weird.
bless John, is not around any. Like, this is a low life thing to say. People, behave yourselves on the internet, for God's sakes.
But they're not going to. It's like I said, I'm
No,
just less bothered. I'm less bothered by it now. My life is really, really good. I feel like God has blessed me to such an enormous degree. So most days I don't even feel worth it. Um, he's just given me such an amazing life. I wouldn't be here without my faith, and I wouldn't even be here without my like, friends that I have and my family. Um, and I have such an incredible, blessed life. And so like random people none of these people will ever sit beside me in the hospital if I'm sick. They won't ever pay any of my bills. They won't ever show up at 3 o'clock in the morning for me to help me with anything. So that's why nobody lives rent free in my head, because none of those people matter.
Yeah, you couldn't be more right. You've blessed us with your presence today, Paul. I'm many years a fan, and like our show and what we're trying to do. We're trying to, raise the profile of the methodology, even hopefully, get eyes on Paul's methodology, get eyes on us, our methodology, and I can't imagine a better person for us to have visited us at this point in the arc of the progress of our shows. I personally can't speak for Billy, but I cannot thank you enough, man. I am a fan. I am honored and privileged to spend this time with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Yeah,
man. That means a lot. I appreciate all those words. It's just absolutely phenomenal.
it's absolutely dope. And like we talked about, what me and Ben's mission here is to do is to just provide something for people that's not confusing, that's easily applicable, that is going to save you time, save you effort, and give you what you're actually putting your time in to try to get back. Right? No matter what level you want to take that to. Want to make it
Right.
simple, want to take out the obfuscation, want to take out the confusion. And
It's a good word. That's a good word.
and
Obfuscation is one of my favorite
So good.
words.
and we're just building on that. We've got a set of principles, and if there's new good information that comes in, add that to it. That's how this
Right.
whole thing has progressed. That's how we've just got so much further and further. And like the things that you've shared today, um, to add on to what we've been doing is huge. And having an understanding of it, having a theoretical understanding that I could then move forward and apply.
Yeah.
It's awesome, man. It was so great to spend this time that you came on with us, man. I'm super grateful for it. I hope people have got a much better perspective of who you actually are and what you're actually doing, because it's the same stuff that we're doing. You're just more educated.
I have a ninth grade education, so I'm definitely not more educated.
Well,
But it's we're three guys that spend a lot of time trying to make other people's lives better because it makes our lives better.
yes,
Right? When
that's
you're
the reward.
giving gifts, Christ calls us to pass those gifts on to the next man,
You
to
know,
our brother.
that's really cool. I talked about that yesterday on the other podcast. Is the reason why if I have like a post and the engagement doesn't do well, it's not because I'm a baby. It's because if I'm putting something together, I know it's going to help a lot of people. I want everybody to see it. So
Yes.
it's not a me thing. It's a you guys need this. Like this is going to help you so much. And when it doesn't do well, I'm like, it's annoying to me because I'm like, man, this is something that's going to really help you guys. So it's like I have this innate desire to really help people, to give back. That's why I do what I do. Like I don't. That's why I don't jump on clout chasing bullshit. That's why I still do educational stuff. That's why I still read multiple studies every single day. It's why I still dig deep and all this stuff. It's because like I want to refine this to a degree and make it palatable for everybody so they can apply it and be like, oh my gosh, my results are insane. That gives me so much fulfillment. So anytime like my content, I have some content that doesn't do well that I know is going to be super helpful. I'm irritated, not because it's an ego thing, but because I'm like, man, I want everybody to see this and know this, like because it's going to be
Yes,
so helpful
dude.
to them. So
That's us right there. That's
yeah,
100% us.
it's nothing because I've had people come at me and like, you're such a big baby. Like, I'm like, I am because I want to help people and I want everybody to see this because I want them to apply it and put it into their training. And I want to get the thousands of DMs that I get every day where somebody's like, I started changing my training based around like this advice by you. And I started seeing like results I've never seen before.
The
So,
reward of knowing that people aren't wasting their time and their effort and their money,
yeah,
that that you're giving them a level of freedom. It's
exactly.
such a rewarding thing is to set people free from those shackles. They've been aimlessly wandering in the wilderness for however many years they've been doing the same broken stuff, and then you could set them free. Like that
Yep.
is such a blessing, man. And
Yeah.
and you really set yourself apart from the guys who are further on the evidence-based spectrum where it gets absolutely ridiculous. Like I forget Jake's last name, but some of this stuff that these people are putting out, it's almost the intention is sensationalism. um like creating this massive crazy fear of for instance, one of them like, oh, you'll lose 90% of progress in 10 days of not training. It's like,
Yeah.
that is absolutely
I I
crazy.
I
Like,
spent a lot of time breaking down the atrophy research with all of the detraining studies. It took a couple of months, and the fear mongering that was happening around some of that stuff for a while was insane.
Yeah.
And I have it all day. What's crazy is I broke down 12 different studies that use biopsies, and I did the math. And I'm not great at math, but I did all the math, and it kept. Well, when I get really nerdy and like excited about science is when I find replication in studies over and over and over, and I get like, whoa, that's cool. And so I had like 12 different detraining studies, detraining or retraining. And I was, when I started doing the math, I'm like, there's the same number, same number, same number, same number, same number, same number. So then I took two researcher friends of mine and I said, I sent them these studies. I'm like, where'd you find those? I'm like, don't ask. I go, do the math on that and get back with me with what number that you got. And so like 3 days later, they're both good at math. And they come back and said, here's the number. It was the exact same number I got. I was like, that's awesome. And I get all nerdtastic about shit like that. But what I was getting at is the atrophy rates were so blown out of proportion.
Fear mongering.
And
that's why you got people chasing
sensationalism, but sensationalism will get you the clicks.
100%. Yeah, they're arguing this kind of stuff now. For that, right? You're like, how is there this huge even debate about trying to, 3 times making 2 times obsolete? Like, how many of you are even getting the progress that you should be training a muscle group twice a week? Like, the majority of the lifting world has been saying, yeah, you should train a muscle group 2 times a week for such a long time.
Yeah, and I've said consistently, I said there's not really going to be a difference between 2 and 3 times a week. That's what all of the data says. All of the data says that kind of the point of diminishing returns happen at twice a week. And then it becomes tribal and cultish because a group of people will say 3 times a week can't be beat. And I'm like, okay, cool. Show me the data. Show me the data. Because if you show me the data and it says 3 times a week can't be beat, I'll change my stance. But my stance is based on all the evidence we have available to us and mechanistically looking at it, there's not really going to be any difference in 2 to 3 times a week. Could 3 times a week be a little bit better for one person than another person? Sure, there's always going to be some individuality that's going to happen there. But to say that it's going to be like that for everybody is a wild stance to take when there's no data to prove that. So I also try to be like the guy that's like making sure kind of, I don't know, that everybody's kept in check, but like this shit gets wild on both sides of these. That's why I said, you brought that up, Billy, is like, you were like, I'm literally off and I'm my own country. Like there's the one side where it's like these people that are saying this, and then the ones that oppose them are over here, and I'm like here, and they both either don't like me or whatever, but none of them can beat me. They can't beat me.
Paul, in our world, we call that the third position.
Yes, sir. That is third position. Yeah, man. There is no left, right. Like I'm not associated with either one. Just because I say this thing doesn't make me this thing. You don't know me like that. I'm not in that camp. Oh, then you must be a Democrat.
I know
no, I'm not that either.
I know I have my own. If you get a big enough following, you're going to have people in your tribe. So I know I have my own tribe, but I don't try to be tribal. My whole goal is to give people the best information possible every day, day in and day out. That's what I care about.
Well, you create a tribe of people that, are critical thinkers. You want a tribe of people that are critical thinkers, that are, objective in their observations, and that are willing to apply and absorb information based on its merit and ability, of its applicable nature. That's the kind of tribe you're building. Most people aren't like that. So
most people, they'll gravitate towards the kind of the overall theme of what the quote unquote leader is saying. So at some point you do have to embrace it if you get popular enough that's going to happen. But it's very weird. Even Brett and I are really close now. We have been for a long time, but he just talks about that. He's like, nobody has an impact on like the whole rest of the field, like when you say something.
For sure.
And he's like, everybody responds to it.
Everybody responds to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, why don't I have like 4 million followers? Like, it's annoying. Like, it's crazy because
you got to post more pictures of your ass, Paul.
I know.
You got to show them titties, Paul. That's what you got.
I know. I got a lot of that. That's, I could definitely post a lot of pictures of my ass, and that would that would definitely shut the internet down. So
That puppy dog might get you some extra follows, man.
yeah, Tater.
Tater.
Like everybody knows who Tater is. So yeah.
There you go.
He's sweet.
There you
He's
go,
sweet.
man.
Well, brother,
Hey, listen.
again, I appreciate your time. We just keep going on and on and on. And that's kind of, me and Ben have a problem with that. And we tend to talk and we get started and we just keep going and we're having fun and
Yeah, it's all good, brother.
and we relate to our guests and we just feel like we were talking to a person we've known forever. And it's just such a awesome thing, man, when you find another person that's of that mindset, of that mentality. Again, man, it was great to have you on. Maybe I'll get you on later in the future, and I'll have I'll actually give you the questions that people were sending me that they want to know from Paul. But I wanted them to get to know Paul today, more importantly, and I wanted to get to know you better myself. And I think we did that, and I got blessed from this. I'm gonna apply some of this stuff, and we're gonna see how it all comes down. But thank you for coming on. I'm super grateful, man. This is
Thanks,
awesome.
man. I appreciate you guys having me.
Can't say enough, folks. The icon, the legend, Paul Carter.
We'll see y'all next time. I'm gonna shut it down.
In order to train as hard as possible, you must retain a clear image of your purpose. Once your goal is sharply but realistically defined, all that remains is carrying out your plan. Don't, however, worry about your individual potential. Potential is only the expression of a possibility, something that can be assessed accurately only in retrospect. In other words, you'll never know how good you might have become unless you try. So let's get with it.